The whispers followed Victoria Keller like a curse through the dusty streets of Promise Creek. Barren, that's what they called her. A woman with a broken womb. A widow who would never know the joy of her own child. And they didn't even bother to lower their voices. For 3 years, since her husband Thomas passed, she'd been a ghost in her own town. Not once had she carried a child. Not for Thomas. Not for anyone. And in 1878, Arizona, that was a death sentence of a different kind. She clutched her market basket, the wicker digging into her palms as she hurried past the gossiping hens outside the haberdashery. The sun beat down, but it wasn't the heat that made her cheeks burn. It was the shame, hot and thick in her throat. Poor Thomas, Mrs. Abernathy said, her voice loud enough to carry. Never got the sons he wanted. Might still be here if he'd had a real family to live for. Victoria walked faster. Her husband had died of pneumonia, a swift and merciless sickness, not a broken heart. But facts were worthless here. Rumors were gold. 3 years ago, she was the beautiful bride of the town's most eligible bachelor. Now, at 26, she was just a story they told to scare young girls. The bell on the general store door jangled, a brief, welcome escape. Mr. Wilkins, the store owner, gave her that look, the same one everyone gave her. Pity mixed with a little bit of discomfort. "Afternoon, Mrs. Keller," he said. "Just the usual, Mr. Wilkins." Her voice was a shield, polished and steady. She had practiced it in the mirror for 1,000 lonely nights. Flour, sugar, coffee, a little salt pork. As he gathered her things, the door jangled again. A gust of wind, a cloud of dust, and the sound of pure, unbridled chaos. Laughter. Victoria turned. 5 children, a mess of dusty clothes and tangled hair, tumbled into the store like a litter of puppies. Behind them stood a man she'd never seen before. He was tall, over 6 feet, with shoulders as broad as an axe handle. The sun had burned his skin to a dark leather, and stubble covered a jaw that looked like it was carved from rock. He wasn't handsome, not in the way Thomas had been. But there was a quiet strength in him that made you look twice. "Settle down now," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "Remember what I said." The oldest, a girl of about 12, wrangled the others towards the candy jars like a seasoned sheepdog. The man walked to the counter, taking off a sweat-stained hat. His eyes were the color of a clear summer sky. "Afternoon," he said to Mr. Wilkins. "Name's Ross Patterson. Just bought the old Miller place out by Cottonwood Creek. Need to stock up." Mr. Wilkins lit up. "Welcome, Mr. Patterson. We were wondering who'd be brave enough to take on that land." "Nothing some hard work won't fix," Ross replied. He glanced at Victoria, a polite nod. "Ma'am." Victoria nodded back, suddenly aware of her faded dress, of the auburn hair escaping its pins. She turned away, pretending to study a sack of beans. "Warren 35, Mrs. Keller," Mr. Wilkins said. As she reached for her coin purse, a small body crashed into her skirts. She looked down. A little boy, maybe 4 years old, with wide eyes and a missing front tooth, stared up at her. He was clutching a stick of candy. "Sorry, ma'am," he mumbled. Before she could answer, Ross was there, a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "Peter, what did I tell you about running?" "To not do it," the boy said, kicking at the floorboards. "And to apologize proper when I forget." He turned his earnest little face back to Victoria. "I'm real sorry for bumping you. Hope I didn't hurt you none." A real smile, the first one in what felt like years, touched Victoria's lips. "No harm done, young man." "This is Peter," Ross said. "My youngest. The others are Sarah, James, Elizabeth, and William." He pointed them out, and a series of shy waves and nods followed. "Your children are lovely," Victoria said, and she meant it. The ache in her heart was a constant companion, but it never made her bitter. "They're a handful," Ross admitted, and a smile transformed his rugged face. "But worth every gray hair." Victoria paid for her goods. As she gathered her packages, the store bell jangled for a third time, and her personal hell walked in, Mrs. Abernathy and her crony, Mrs. Collins. Their voices dropped to a conspiratorial hiss the second they saw her. "There she is," Mrs. Collins murmured, not quite quietly enough. "Poor Thomas must be turnin' in his grave." "A man needs sons," Mrs. Abernathy added, her voice dripping with false pity. "Some women just aren't meant for motherhood. The Lord gives children to those who deserve them." The words were a physical blow. Victoria froze, the packages heavy in her arms. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. The shame was a thick, black hood over her head. Then a new voice cut through the store like a cold wind. "Ladies." It was Ross Patterson. "Where I come from, it's considered poor manners to speak ill of others, especially within earshot." Mrs. Abernathy puffed up like an angry toad. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean, sir." "You were gossiping," Ross said, his voice calm but sharp as a razor, "and causing pain to someone who's done you no harm." Victoria wanted the floor to swallow her whole. To be shamed was one thing. To be defended was somehow worse. It made it real. It made everyone stare. "You're new here, Mr. Patterson," Mrs. Collins sniffed. "You don't know the circumstances. It's a tragedy when a woman can't fulfill her God-given purpose." Victoria flinched. She felt the blood drain from her face. But then, something incredible happened. Ross Patterson stepped forward. His 5 children moved with him, a small, silent army at his back. "Ma'am," he said, his voice resonating through the suddenly silent store. "I've buried a wife. I've raised 5 children alone. I've seen life begin and end, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that a woman's purpose isn't defined by whether or not she bears children." He turned his sky-blue eyes on Victoria. "I don't know you, ma'am, but I know cruelty when I hear it, and I know that motherhood isn't just about giving birth. It's about love, sacrifice, nurturing. My Sarah here was mothered by my sister after my wife passed. My sister never had children of her own. She's as much a mother as any woman who's ever given birth." He turned back to the 2 stunned women. "So I'd thank you to keep your judgments to yourselves. You don't know what battles other people are fighting." Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. Even Mr. Wilkins was frozen behind the counter. Mrs. Abernathy and Mrs. Collins mumbled something about a pie in the oven and practically ran out of the store. Victoria just stood there, rooted to the spot. No one had ever defended her. Not like that. Not ever. "I apologize if I overstepped," Ross said to her, his voice low. "Not my place, I know, but I can't abide cruelty." Victoria found her voice. It was a whisper. "Thank you, Mr. Patterson." "Not kind," he said. "Just decent." He nodded at her packages. "May I help you with those? We're headed to our wagon." Victoria hesitated. She wasn't used to kindness. She didn't know how to accept it. "I couldn't impose." "It's no imposition. Sarah, help Mrs. Keller. Victoria Keller. Help Mrs. Keller with her packages." The young girl, Sarah, stepped forward with a warm smile and took 2 of the parcels. Reluctantly, Victoria let her, and she followed the Patterson family out into the bright, unforgiving sun. The whole town was watching now. She could feel their eyes on her back. But for the first time, she wasn't alone in the spotlight. She was part of this chaotic, chattering procession. The children darted around her like hummingbirds, and for a moment, the whispers in her head went quiet. "Do you live far, Mrs. Keller?" Ross asked as he lifted his youngest into the wagon. "Just at the edge of town, the white house with the blue shutters." "We'll drop you then." It's on our way." Before she could protest, little Peter had her by the hand. "You can sit with me. Pa says I can keep the horny toad I found if I build him a proper house." His excitement was a wave that washed over her. Ross helped her onto the wagon seat, his calloused hand strong and sure. Peter squeezed in between them. As the wagon lurched forward, away from the prying eyes of the general store, Victoria felt something shift inside her chest, a strange, unfamiliar lightness. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't just the barren widow. She was just a woman, riding in a wagon, with a little boy who wanted to show her a horny toad. And she didn't know it yet. But this wagon ride was taking her far away from the life she knew. It was taking her towards a future she never, ever would have imagined. The ride to her small white house was surprisingly comfortable. The dust of the main street gave way to the quiet of the South Road. Ross Patterson didn't press her with questions. He just spoke of the land, of the work that needed doing at the old Miller place. "My Catherine passed 6 years ago," he said, his eyes on the road. "Childbirth. Elizabeth was just a baby, never knew her mother." He said it simply, a fact, not a plea for sympathy. "That must have been difficult," Victoria said, her heart aching for the little girl in the back of the wagon. "Still is some days," he admitted. "But we manage." He glanced at her. "You live alone now?" "Yes, it's not easy being alone." The words came out before she could stop them. "No, it isn't," he said, his agreement a balm on a wound she didn't realize was still open. "But as you said, one manages." They arrived at her neat little house too soon. Ross jumped down, his boots kicking up dust, and came around to help her. His hand was rough, but his grip was gentle as it closed around hers. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Patterson," she said. "And for earlier." His eyes were full of understanding. Those women had no right. Victoria looked down at her worn shoes. "People talk. I've learned to live with it." "You shouldn't have to," he said, his voice firm. "A person's worth isn't measured by whether they have children." She met his gaze, startled by the conviction in his voice. The world seemed to stop for a second. The dusty street, the chirping birds, all of it faded away. There was just the quiet intensity of this stranger's gaze. "Mrs. Keller," Peter's small voice broke the spell. "Can we come visit you sometime? Pa says we're neighbors now, and neighbors should be friendly." Victoria smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Of course you can, Peter. Anytime." Ross handed her the last of her packages, their fingers brushing. An unexpected warmth shot up her arm. "Good luck with the Miller place," she said. "We'll do our best with it." He tipped his hat. "Good day, Mrs. Keller." She stood at her gate and watched the wagon roll away, the 5 children waving until they disappeared around a bend. And for the first time in a very long time, Victoria Keller felt something stir in the barren, dusty corners of her heart. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was the possibility of it. And that was more than she'd had in years. The next morning, Victoria woke with a strange sense of anticipation. She went about her chores, feeding the chickens, tending her garden, but her eyes kept drifting north, toward Cottonwood Creek. She pictured the 5 children exploring the rundown farm, Ross patching the leaking roof. It was none of her business. They were strangers. And yet, she couldn't shake the memory of his kindness or the feel of his calloused hand. She sat down with her sewing, a new dress for Mrs. Thornton. But just as she threaded the needle, a cloud of dust appeared on the road. Her heart gave a little jump. It was the Patterson wagon. Ross pulled up, helping his 2 youngest, Peter and Elizabeth, down from the back. He came up her porch steps, hat in hand. "Good morning, Mrs. Keller. Hope we're not disturbing you." "Not at all." Her heart was beating entirely too fast. "Is everything all right?" "Just fine, on our way to town, and the children insisted we stop." He gave the two bouncing children a look. "Though I suspect they have ulterior motives involving your chickens." Victoria laughed. "Would you like to see them?" The children's faces lit up. She led them around the side of the house, showing them how to scatter cracked corn for the flock of Rhode Island Reds. They giggled as the hens bustled around their feet. "We're hoping to get some chickens of our own," Ross said, watching them. "And a milk cow. The house needs work. The roof leaks. There's a broken window. But the bones are good." "The Millers were good people," Victoria said, surprising herself. "Mr. Miller built that house to last. He was so easy to talk to. He didn't look at her with pity. He just looked at her." "Pa!" Sarah called from the wagon. "We should get going." As they started to leave, Elizabeth, the little girl who'd never known her mother, stopped by the flower bed. "Look, Pa, flowers." She pointed to the early tulips just starting to bloom. "They're tulips," Victoria told her. "They'll be fully open in a few days." Elizabeth looked up, her eyes wide and serious. "Our ma had flowers, but they all died after she did. Nobody remembered to water them." The simple, sad statement hit Victoria like a physical blow. She knelt beside the child. "Would you like one? When they bloom, I could cut one for you." The little girl's face was transformed by a radiant smile. "Could I have a red one?" Red was Ma's favorite color. "Of course you can," Victoria promised. Impulsively, the child threw her tiny arms around Victoria's neck. A hug. Tight and real. Victoria froze for a heartbeat, then gently hugged her back. It had been so long, so very long since anyone had held her like that. When she stood up, Ross was watching them, his expression unreadable. "We should be going," he said. He helped the children into the wagon. Then he paused. He looked nervous. "Mrs. Keller, I was wondering, the children and we're not much for cooking. It's been mostly beans and biscuits." He hesitated. "Would you consider taking a meal with us tomorrow evening? Nothing fancy, but the children would enjoy the company." Victoria was stunned into silence. Dinner? With a family? People would talk. But then, people already talked. "I'd be delighted," she heard herself say. "Perhaps I could bring a pie." Ross's face broke into a grin that lit up his tired eyes. "The children would be over the moon. We haven't had a proper dessert since Kansas City." "Then a pie it is," she said. "I'll come fetch you," he said. "Around 5? 5 is perfect." As the wagon pulled away, Victoria stood in her yard, a hand to her chest. Her sewing was forgotten. Her lonely routine was shattered. And her day, which had started out just like every other empty day, was suddenly, impossibly, bright with anticipation. She was going to have dinner with the Pattersons. She was walking into a house full of motherless children, a house she knew was half broken and barely livable. What was she thinking? But she was smiling. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she was truly, genuinely smiling. That night, Victoria didn't just make one pie, she made 2. Apple and cherry, using the last of her precious winter preserves. As she worked the dough, she found herself humming, a sound she hadn't heard in her own house since Thomas was alive. The next day she washed her hair and pinned it up loosely, letting a few curls frame her face. She put on her best blue calico dress, the one Thomas used to say matched her eyes. She looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. A woman with color in her cheeks and a light in her eyes she didn't recognize. Was she being foolish? This was just neighborly kindness. Ross Patterson was a grieving widower with 5 children. He wasn't looking to court the town's barren woman. But the flutter in her stomach told a different story. At 4:30, his wagon appeared on the horizon. She met him at the gate with the pies wrapped in clean linen. "Mrs. Keller," he said, jumping down, "you look lovely." She blushed like a schoolgirl. "Thank you. And please, call me Victoria." "Victoria," he repeated, and the name sounded new in his deep voice. "I'm Ross." He helped her onto the wagon seat, his hand strong and warm. "The children have been beside themselves all day," he told her as they rode. "Sarah's swept the floor 3 times, and James actually volunteered to wash dishes. It's a miracle." Victoria laughed, a real happy sound. The Miller place came into view. The farmhouse was faded and peeling, but it stood tall among the cottonwood trees. It wasn't much, but it had potential. It was a place for a family to grow. As they pulled into the yard, the front door burst open. All 5 children tumbled out, a wave of excitement crashing against the wagon. "Mrs. Keller, you came! Did you bring pie? I found a turtle. Do you want to see it?" Ross laughed, holding up his hands for silence. "Let the woman get down before you overwhelm her." He helped her down and lifted the precious pies from the wagon bed. The children led her inside. They had tried so hard. The porch was swept. A pot of wildflowers sat by the door. Inside, the floors were scrubbed, and the table was set with mismatched plates. "We don't have much in the way of fancy furnishings," Ross said, almost apologetically. "It's lovely," Victoria said, and she meant it. The house felt warm. It felt alive. It felt like a home. They gave her a tour, all 5 children talking at once, showing her their rooms, their secret hiding spots. A venison stew Sarah had made bubbled on the stove, filling the air with a savory aroma. Dinner was loud and chaotic and wonderful. The children chattered, telling her about their plans for the farm. Elizabeth announced she was going to plant a flower garden, just like her ma had. As the little girl described the flowers she remembered, Victoria caught Ross watching her from across the table. His eyes were soft, and when they met hers, something warm and unfamiliar bloomed in her chest. After dinner, the pies were brought out to a chorus of cheers. Later, as the evening wound down, little Peter, sleepy and full, climbed right into Victoria's lap. He rested his head against her shoulder, his small body a trusting weight against hers. She felt something inside her, something that had been broken for years, begin to mend. "Peter," Ross started to say, "you're too big for that." "It's all right," Victoria said quickly. "I don't mind at all." Peter yawned. "Mrs. Keller is soft," he murmured, his eyes drooping. "And she smells nice, like flowers." Tears pricked Victoria's eyes. The simple, innocent acceptance of a child was a gift she never thought she'd receive. Soon the younger children were nodding off. Ross sent them up to bed with gentle firmness. "I should be going," Victoria said, as the children trudged upstairs. "Let me get them settled. I'll take you home." While he was gone, she started washing the dishes at the kitchen pump. It felt natural. It felt right. She was drying the last plate when Ross came back downstairs. "You didn't need to do that," he said. "I wanted to. It's been a long time since I've had the pleasure of a family dinner." He took the plate from her, his fingers brushing hers. "Thank you for coming tonight. The children needed this. A woman's presence." He paused, his blue eyes searching hers. "To be honest, I needed it too." Her heart skipped a beat. The small kitchen was suddenly charged with an unspoken energy. He was looking at her, really looking at her, and she felt a connection so strong it was almost frightening. The ride home was quiet, filled with the comfortable silence of 2 people who had just shared something important. At her gate, he helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you again," he said, "for everything." Perhaps, Victoria found herself saying, her voice braver than she felt. "Perhaps you could all come for dinner at my house next time." "We'd like that very much," Ross said. "How about next Saturday?" "Saturday would be perfect." He took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. A simple touch, but it sent a jolt through her. "Good night, Victoria." She watched him drive away, her world completely tilted on its axis. She had gone to his rundown ranch expecting chaos, expecting pity. Instead, she had found something else entirely, something that felt dangerously like a beginning. The week flew by in a happy blur. Victoria cleaned and baked and sewed, her thoughts constantly drifting to Ross and his children. On Wednesday, a small bouquet of wildflowers appeared on her porch with a child's drawing of a woman feeding chickens. The note read, "To Mrs. Keller from Elizabeth. Thank you for being nice to us." Victoria hung the drawing in her kitchen like a priceless piece of art. By Saturday, her house was filled with the smells of fried chicken and fresh-baked pies. She put on her best dress and waited, her heart thumping with a nervous energy she hadn't felt since she was a girl. She heard the wagon approaching, but the sound was wrong. It was too fast, frantic. She ran to the door. The Patterson wagon came careening up the road, Ross whipping the horses, the children huddled in the back. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. Victoria's heart leaped into her throat as she ran down the porch steps. The wagon skidded to a halt. Ross's face was a mask of terror. In the back, Sarah was holding a crying Elizabeth. "What is it? What's happened?" Victoria cried. "It's Elizabeth," Ross said, his voice strained as he jumped down. "She fell from the hayloft. Her arm, I think it's broken. The doctor's out of town." Victoria didn't hesitate. Her father had been the town doctor. She had been his nurse, his assistant, his shadow. She knew what to do. "Bring her inside," she commanded, her voice steady and calm. "Now." Ross lifted the sobbing little girl from the wagon. Her left arm was cradled against her chest in a makeshift sling. "It hurts, Pa," she whimpered. "I know, sweetheart. Mrs. Keller is going to help." Victoria led them into her parlor, sweeping everything off the sofa. "Lay her here. The rest of you, in the kitchen. There's lemonade." The children, wide-eyed and scared, filed past her obediently. Victoria knelt beside Elizabeth. "Hello, dear. I hear you've had quite a tumble." The little girl nodded, fresh tears rolling down her pale cheeks. "I was looking for kittens." "She knows better than to be up there alone," Ross said, his voice tight with fear and frustration. "What's done is done," Victoria said, her focus entirely on the child. "I'm going to look at your arm, sweetheart. I'll be as gentle as I can." She carefully removed the sling. The arm was swollen, but not bent at an unnatural angle. A good sign. She gently felt along the bone, her touch firm but kind, murmuring soothing words as Elizabeth winced. "I don't think it's broken," she announced at last. The relief in the room was palpable. Ross sagged against the door frame. "It's a bad sprain. We need to wrap it tightly." She was in her element. She sent Ross for arnica salve from her medicine cupboard, tore strips of clean cloth for bandages. Together they worked, Victoria's calm confidence guiding Ross's shaking hands. She showed him how to wrap the arm, how to keep it elevated. Elizabeth, her sobs subsiding, watched Victoria with wide, trusting eyes. When they were finished, the little girl looked up. "Does this mean we can't have dinner?" Victoria smiled, stroking her hair. "Of course we're having dinner. You'll just need a little help cutting your food." The meal was subdued, but Elizabeth, propped up with pillows, basked in the attention. Ross was quiet, but his eyes kept finding Victoria's across the table. They held a look she'd never seen before. It wasn't just gratitude, it was awe. After dinner, as the older children cleared the plates, Ross pulled her aside. "I can't thank you enough," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You were incredible. You kept us all calm." "Anyone would have done the same," she deflected. "No," he said, his gaze intense. "Not anyone. You have a gift, Victoria. A gift for healing, for nurturing. I saw it today. You're a natural mother, whether you've borne children or not." The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. All her life she'd been told the opposite, that she was broken, incomplete, less than a woman. And now this man, this good, kind man, was telling her she was everything she'd been told she could never be. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked. That means more than you know." He took her hand. "I think I do know. Those women in town, what they said, it was cruel and it was wrong. Being a mother isn't about biology. It's about having a heart that loves unconditionally. I've seen that heart in you from the first day we met." She couldn't speak. She could only nod, blinking back tears. He brushed his thumb across her knuckles. "I'd like to call on you properly, Victoria, if you're amenable." Her heart stuttered. "Call on me?" "Court you," he clarified, a hint of nerves in his own voice now. "I know it's soon, and I know I'm a package deal. 5 children is a lot. But there's something between us. Something I never thought I'd feel again." The room spun. "The town will talk," she whispered, the old fears rising up. "They'll say you could do better than a barren widow." His face hardened. "Let them talk. I know what I feel." His expression softened. Unless you don't feel the same." "No," she said too quickly. "Yes, I do. I don't want to bring you hardship." "We make our own happiness, Victoria," he said, his voice firm. "The rest is just noise." Before she could answer, Peter and Elizabeth came running into the room. "Pa, Mrs. Keller made 2 kinds of pie." Ross smiled, his eyes never leaving hers. "We'll be there in a moment." When the children were gone, he stepped closer. "Think about it. That's all I ask." He leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek, his beard soft against her skin. "You're already a mother to them, in all the ways that matter," he whispered. Then he offered her his arm. "Now, I believe we were promised pie." Victoria placed her hand on his arm, her legs trembling. She was stepping onto a path she thought had been closed to her forever. A path that led to a noisy dining room, 5 hopeful children, and a man who saw not what was broken in her, but what was whole. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Ross courted her properly, with a quiet, steady dedication that melted the last of her defenses. He brought her wildflowers the children had picked. He sat with her on her porch swing in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. He spoke of his late wife, Catherine, with love and respect, never making Victoria feel like a replacement. In turn, she found herself talking about Thomas, the happy memories finally outweighing the sad ones. One evening in late May, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, she finally told him about the doctors, about the years of disappointment, the quiet, unspoken shame that had settled over her marriage like a shroud. "He was a good man," she said, her voice soft. "But he was devastated when I couldn't conceive. I think he'd given up on me." Ross took her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not for me. I have more children than I know what to do with. But for the pain you've carried all alone." She leaned her head against his solid shoulder. "I thought I'd made my peace with it, until I met you and your brood. They've reawakened something in me." He put his arm around her, drawing her close. "They adore you, all of them, but they need more than I can give them alone." He turned to face her, his expression serious in the fading light. "Victoria, I love you." The words were simple, direct, honest, just like the man himself. "I didn't expect to find this again," he continued, "but here it is. I love your kindness, your strength. I love the woman you are." Tears sprang to her eyes. "Oh, Ross," she whispered, "I love you too, so much it frightens me." "Why does it frighten you?" he asked, his hands cupping her face. "Because I can't give you more children." The old fear, the old shame, came out in a rush. "And you might want that someday." He shook his head, his gaze firm and unwavering. "Victoria, I have 5 beautiful, healthy children. That is more than enough. I don't need more children. I need a partner, a woman who will love me and my existing family." His thumbs brushed away her tears. "That woman is you, if you'll have us." Her breath caught in her throat. Are you asking me to marry you?" A slow smile spread across his face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. From it, he tipped a simple gold ring with a single small pearl into his palm. "It was my mother's," he said. "She told me to save it for when I found love again." His voice was steady, but his eyes shone with emotion. "Victoria Keller, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and a mother to my children?" "Yes," she breathed, the word a prayer, a release, a triumphant cry. "Yes, with all my heart, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He drew her into his arms, and his kiss was a promise of a future she had never dared to dream of. When they finally parted, breathless and laughing, he rested his forehead against hers. "I should warn you," he said, a twinkle in his eye. "The children already knew I was going to ask. They've probably been watching from the window this whole time." Victoria glanced at the house. Sure enough, 5 small faces were pressed against the parlor window glass, their expressions a mixture of excitement and pure joy. "Shall we go tell our children the good news?" Ross asked, offering her his hand. "Our children." The words echoed in her heart, filling all the empty spaces. She took his hand, and together they walked towards the house, towards the chaotic, beautiful, noisy family that was, impossibly, hers. The wedding was on a perfect June morning. The little church was full. The town that had once whispered behind her back now watched with smiles as she walked down the aisle. Sarah and Elizabeth were her bridesmaids, their hair woven with wildflowers. Ross waited at the altar, flanked by James and William, looking handsome and nervous in their new suits. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Ross kissed her, and the whole church erupted in cheers. But before they could even turn to walk back down the aisle, they were mobbed. 5 pairs of arms wrapped around them in a massive group hug. "We're a real family now," Sarah declared, her face beaming. "We always were," Ross said, his arm tight around Victoria's waist. "But now we're complete." The reception at the ranch was a joyous affair. The house was freshly painted, the yard filled with flowers. Even Mrs. Abernathy came, bringing a large cake and offering a stiff but sincere apology. "You've done wonders with those children," she admitted. "They needed a mother's touch." Victoria, too happy to hold a grudge, simply thanked her. Life settled into a new, wonderful rhythm. The ranch prospered. The children thrived. They called her Ma, tentatively at first, and then with a natural ease that made her heart sing every time she heard it. She discovered a boundless capacity for love inside herself. She was a wife. She was a mother. The barren widow of Promise Creek was gone forever. One day in early December, at a meeting of the Ladies' Aid Society, she heard about a new family, the Rowlands. They'd lost their 4 older children to scarlet fever back in October. Just buried them, and then the wife, Eliza, gave birth to a new baby. They had come to Promise Creek to escape the ghosts, but the grief had followed them. The poor woman, Mrs. Johnson said, her voice low. She barely speaks, just sits and stares, holding that baby. Her husband is at his wit's end. Victoria's heart clenched. She knew that kind of despair, that feeling of being lost in a dark wood with no way out. That night she told Ross, "I have to help them." He didn't question her. He just asked, "What do you have in mind?" The next day, she packed a basket of food and a small knitted cap she'd once made for a baby she never had. Ross drove her out to the dilapidated Harper cabin where the Rollins family was staying. A man, his face etched with sorrow, answered the door. Inside, a woman sat rocking by the fire, her eyes as empty as a winter sky. A small bundle was in her arms. Victoria introduced herself gently. She didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. She just spoke from her own scarred heart. "I lost my first husband," she told the silent woman. "I know it's not the same, but I know what it's like to feel that the world has ended." A flicker of life in the woman's eyes. Her lips trembled. "They were so young," she whispered, her voice rusty from disuse. "How do I deserve to live when they didn't?" Victoria knelt beside her. "You live for this little one," she said softly, nodding at the baby. "He needs his mother." Tears streamed down Eliza Rawlins' face. Victoria stayed for over an hour. She held the baby, a little boy named Thomas, while Eliza ate for the first time in days. Before she left, Victoria made an offer. "My husband and I would like to invite you for Christmas dinner. We have 5 children who would love to meet your little Thomas." A look of terror, then a tiny spark of something else, crossed Eliza's face. "I don't know if I can." "You can," Victoria said, with a certainty that surprised even herself. "One day at a time, that's all any of us can do." Christmas Day was bright and cold. The Patterson house was filled with warmth and laughter and the smell of roasting turkey. The Rollins family arrived, timid and fragile, but they were there. Eliza was still thin, still sad, but she had brushed her hair and put on a clean dress. The Patterson children, coached by Victoria, were gentle and kind. Peter was fascinated by the baby. "I'm not the littlest anymore," he declared proudly. After dinner, baby Thomas began to fuss. Eliza tried to soothe him, but her movements were tense with exhaustion and grief. "May I?" Victoria asked, holding out her arms. Eliza handed the baby over. Victoria walked with him, humming softly, her movements sure and calm. He settled against her shoulder, his tiny body a warm weight of trust. "You're a born mother," Eliza said, watching her. There was no envy in her voice, only a deep, weary admiration. "I never thought I'd have this," Victoria admitted quietly. "I was told this door was closed to me forever." "And now you have 5, Eliza whispered. "And now I have 5, Victoria agreed, a smile touching her lips. "Life takes unexpected turns." She looked at the grieving mother. "There's no replacing what you've lost, I know that. But there can be joy again, in time. I believe that with all my heart." For the first time, a real, genuine smile touched Eliza's lips. "I'm beginning to believe it too." Later, as the afternoon faded, Ross came to stand beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. She was still holding the sleeping baby. "You look right holding a baby," he said softly. "It feels right." She leaned against him. She told him about her plan. John Rollins needed work. They had an old line shack on their property that could be fixed up. Ross kissed her temple. "Already thought of it," he murmured. "I was going to offer him the job before they leave today." She turned her face up to his, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Have I told you today how much I love you, Ross Patterson?" "You have," he said, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "But I never get tired of hearing it." He bent and kissed her, a soft, lingering kiss filled with all the love and peace she had found in this unexpected life. She stood there, wrapped in her husband's arms, a sleeping baby nestled against her shoulder, her 5 children laughing in the next room. The whispers of the past were finally, completely silent. The path that had been marked by so much sorrow had led her home. She was not the barren widow. She was Victoria Patterson, a wife, a friend, a mother, in all the ways that truly mattered. And that, she knew with a deep and unshakable certainty, was more than enough. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of hope from the most unexpected places.